Hey everybody, it's Caleb here. I wanted to preface this video really quickly by saying that most of this footage that I generated and edited a bulk of, I did back in January when Tripo was actually completely free to use and download. They had a paid plan, but I wanted to go over some of the changes, even though the core algorithm that generates the models and the way the texture and the way the meshes and texture are handled is still pretty similar. It just has some new add-ons. Firstly, the most important thing is that they've gone to a credit system. So before you had a certain amount of refinements that you can do to a model, a 3D model, before you ran out of your limit, and then you had to pay for a plan. Now it just costs money to generate a 3D model. It costs 60 credits, and you're given, I didn't pay anything, and I was given 600 credits when I first revisited this site. So that's the first thing to know, is that they're on credits. It's not free to try prompts. If you type in a prompt such as, it will auto-populate with some suggestions based on what's been generated in the past. To create something of your own costs 60 credits unless you add a picture, in which the cost to generate a model goes down to 25 credits. And I can only guess this is because the system works by generating an image of your model and then feeding that to the 3D AI model generator. So that is a quick rundown of how TripoAI works now. You can click on any of these models and view them in 3D and then download them for 5 credits. Let me show you guys two pieces that I did to learn this system and its updates. This is a dragon squishmallow, and in Blender, when it comes out, it's going to look like this. This is pretty consistent with what I have in my videos, where it's a bunch of chunky pieces like this, and if you hit edit, it all breaks down into triangles that break apart at the seam. So if I click on this, it will pull away from that because they're separate objects. When it all comes in, they're one objects, but you can separate them by loose parts, and even when it's all one, these two objects will break apart. And then their texture looks like this, where it's all jumbled, meshed together. Almost every pixel is spoken for. Well, every pixel is spoken for. And that differs from the newer high poly versions. So this version, the original version, was 50,000 triangles, and you can see that by pulling your overlays down and hitting statistics. So this one was 50,000 triangles, which is standard for the model that I was using. This high poly version is 64,000 triangles, and you can see the difference in this if we find what image this is linked to. Diffuse remeshed. So this uses the alpha channel and only has pixels where it counts. Whereas in the other one, it would blend between those pixels. It is a little chunkier. There was a previous model, AI model, that they used that made it very squared, but this is better. So you can go in and modify these textures a little bit. It does get pretty broken up here, and there's no human consistency on it. And then the low poly model was pretty similar. Let's look up It looks like I used this low poly's textures in the high poly version when I was recording. But if I compare the two textures, they look pretty similar. So it's using a similar algorithm. Hello everybody, it is Caleb, and today I want to share with you a resource and workflow that I discovered to AI generate 3D models from a text prompt. And these models have textures, they come in a GLB format, and they're good for distances of around 8 to 10 meters away. There's a couple that are good for closer, like certain animals, but those are around 5 meters. And if you were to get closer than that, you can notice the flaws. These models do come with a downside. If you were to try to work with the topology, you'd find that they are very hard to work with. It's similar to photogrammetry scans, where everything's made of triangles and there's almost no consistency in where the lines go or the topology curves. And so manipulating the meshes outside of using the sculpting tool in Blender is really difficult. It's basically impossible. But they are good for what they are. So let me show you how to use this real quick. After creating an account with them, you're going to click Generate for free. And then you're going to get brought to this text prompt. And here's where you enter your text prompt. Now I'll show you a couple hacks in the text prompts of my examples here. One of them is if you're going to do an animal, do a add photograph to it. So let's do a golden, I haven't tried a puppy yet. And actually let's change this breed because I have a golden retriever in the next one. You get a distance away and they look okay. You get closer and it's a different story. So that's what these are good for. Let me share with you guys my examples and what I found so far in prompting and generating, and certain things it's good at, certain things it's not. So golden retriever did well. I have no complaints except for this poor guy. And then, by the way, you can download all of these drafts and you don't have to hit generate. The snake did okay. My prompt was cute green snake photo. And it seemed to make this snake into a loop quite a few times. This was the only one where it almost, well, it did at the bottom here. But it looks like it didn't. The lizard did well. Shark did very well. I'm impressed. I tried copyrighted materials like SpongeBob and got mixed results. So SpongeBob did very well. This was a first try. Patrick, not so much. It didn't get the proportions right, and I don't know what these two are. This was an attempt, but it looks like Donkey Kong's face got mixed in. Variations of well-known objects worked out, like Minecraft SpongeBob. I didn't want to run the other two with Minecraft for fear of what the results would bring. Instruments, it did very well on, like many types of guitars it did well on. This was a Fender Stratocaster. And then guitar amps it did well on. I also tried things like Apple Mac Pros and laptops, and it did pretty well on that. The cello it did well on. So anything with a decent sized body on it did pretty well on. This one got in a road accident. Feel sorry for this one. The only instrument it didn't do well on was the drum set because of all the reflections and skinny parts. So I ended up with a lot of these floating drum sets. That one is a double bass. Performers, for the means of taking light in visualizations, it did well on that because it's dang. It did well on mimicking the human body, even though this one, not so much. And then here it tried to impose my prompt, performer dancing, onto the stage, which I thought was interesting. So mannequins it can do. Here's another example of mannequins. Perfectly fine for demonstrating light on stage. But quick note on mannequins, the uncanny valley applies to other people too. So look up the uncanny valley. This guy here starts to cross the uncanny valley into terrifying. So what you want is bodies without faces. You look that way. What you want is bodies, you too. What you want is bodies without faces. Otherwise, you might scare your clients a bit. The uncanny valley basically is where objects that don't look like humans look good to the human eye until they start to look like humans, and then they start to look uglier and scare us. And as they approach looking human, that curve goes down and reaches past the point of a box. It looks uglier than a box. So as it then approaches looking more human-like, it comes back up. And as it hits a certain point where your brain then accepts it as looking human-like, then it looks good. Better than it started. Better than this. But because of the uncanny valley, this looks better than this. So let's move on to other more non-organic shapes. It does do organic shapes pretty well. It doesn't do mechanical shapes too well. It did the semi-truck pretty well. I didn't try with a tractor attached. Well, I did try with a tractor attached. I didn't try doing the tractor separately. What I was going to say is if you're going to do a truck and tractor and trailer, do the trailer separately and then just attach them in 3D however you would. Flames. This was a cartoon style flame. It didn't do that well. I tried this a couple times and it didn't get the thickness that I wanted. So let's try real quick reprompting this to thick flame. This was another flame. This was when I took away the cartoon style, and I think it did a little bit better, but still hard to work with and kind of looks more like a cave. I don't know if it's a stalagmite or a stalactite. Stalactite. Buildings. I was being silly on this one and prompted burrito skyscraper. And it didn't. Well, you know what? It kind of does look. These two look like burritos. But, so buildings it does fairly well on. You know, if you were to zoom out. This one would look a little bit curvy. This one comes with a basement. That's interesting. Building interiors were decent to work with. I got a couple good ones, but they are all pretty much too close to the target to look good. So what I would recommend for interiors, if it's a virtual production or a like a camera shoot, use facades. So prompt it facade and then enter your theme. And what you get is these. And then you could just arrange these to be around your room. But what it does is it focuses on one wall and generates something good looking for that one wall, and then you can just duplicate that or get different types of walls. Oddly, if you do facade, yeah, it'll make one facade and then sometimes it'll fill in an entire building. And like in this one, even put an antenna. But on other ones, I had it come up with quite a few just flat objects. This was curvy facade with vertical light strips. I actually haven't seen this one. That's interesting. It looks like a LED. It looks like a JDC1. That's really cool. That's interesting. So this prompt didn't work out too well. Except for this one. This one's alright. I would duplicate this one. Find a nice... This one would be nice because you can duplicate it at different rotations and get different results. Household objects like vases, that worked pretty well. Facade with pillars was a good one. A good prompt for adding depth to a shot. Or just whatever you wanted. Pillars seem to work out pretty well. So things that didn't work out well were a sports arena interior. I thought that I could get better results. This was about the best I got. So you could try prompting it a couple more times than I did. But it sometimes just ended up with these weird shapes. Or, yeah, this was the best that I got, though. I would just go along and kind of delete these backs. Road cases, I feel like it did. Road case, I'll show you. It did okay with... This is a suitcase. It did okay with before I tried getting to cable caddy. So if I prompt just road case, it does a decent job. So it did an alright job with road cases. If I reprompt this a couple times, I'd probably get something. Consoles did a terrible job with. So either I got these box shapes. This one's like an AC unit. Oh, it's hollow on the inside. What I got with consoles was curved bottoms. So you would think the perspective of this would be straight down, but it's not. It's something like this. So that didn't work. Then this one proved this. This was actually the flattest, best looking console that I got. And it has a blue screen, which I think is interesting. So consoles are a no-go for it. Truss, this is why I thought with the hot dog, I don't know where the hot dog went. This is why I thought with the hot dog that it wouldn't do well with square proportion or long proportions, because I kept getting this square shape. Even at times where it knew what my prompt is pretty specific, 20-inch truss, and if I Google this, oh, I get why it came up with the box shape so many times now. So it's understandable that it came up with that box, but yeah, it doesn't do a very good job at truss. If you do find a good solution to truss for prompting, let me know. But I guess I could make a tutorial in Blender on how to make truss. The Nightmare Before Christmas head was a fun prompt I thought of, and first try it did very well. Other times it kind of went more towards a skeleton. And then the YouTube logo did not do well at all. So I'm not sure what happened here, why it can't. Well, let's see. Yeah, YouTube, that's a pretty simple logo. So I would have expected it. It got close here. So now that I've shown you some prompted models, let me show you how to modify these models and get lower polygon counts out of them. And I'm going to fast forward to importing all of these to save time. So I'll get back to you in a second. I'm going to set all of these models up in some pretty way. And then I want to also show you guys where to find your polygon count for what's selected. If you go to this drop down arrow here, you can turn on statistics. And that will show you triangles and faces for your total scene and for what's selected. So let's get into the time lapse. number one thing to know when working with these meshes is that when you go into edit mode by hitting tab, all of these triangles are not touching each other. And also, you'll never find a flow in this topology unless they revise their algorithm. So you look at these triangles and they look like they are all connected. And if you grab any of these triangles and move them around, most of them will move with everything connected next to it. But if you look at these thick lines here and you click on one of them, you'll see that the vertices lying next to the next group of faces, they're not joined. And so you can select these islands by clicking on a triangle and then pressing Control L to select linked faces. And you do have some options to this as well, but I find it works just fine as is. And so you can select them manually, or you can press just any, or without any faces selected, click P and then separate by loose parts. But I want to show you something real quick before I do that. And that is that if we were to look at this material here, this texture, this face and this face are not next to each other. And so likewise, both of these groups of faces are very far apart from each other. And so if you were to try to do some texture work along one of these seams, you might find that you get really weird results. So what we're going to do is click anywhere and then press P and separate by loose parts. And that's going to break this all apart into different objects. Now, one thing to be wary of is don't go out of solo mode into your main map and then start clicking around and especially start making changes. Because what's going to happen is you're going to have a hard time getting that selection back, especially if these are all broken down into little parts and you've already got stuff scattered everywhere. Now, if that's happened, because it's happened to me while I was telling you guys not to, one way to fix that and select all of your parts again is to go into worlds here. I don't know what these models are, but the worlds are the objects that you import. And so if you click on the down arrow and then toggle visibility on their geometry, then you can see what they are. So this, I think, is the guitar amp that I forgot to segment back together. So I'm going to do that now. And then on this room, I know that it's the last object I imported, so I'm going to click on this worlds here. And if I select all this geometry, I should be able to select my room again, all of the components associated with my room, and then merge them back together. But I'm not going to merge them just yet. I'm going to go back into solo mode, and what I want to do is do a little round of mesh cleanup. So you'll see there is this floating face here that I have to delete, but there's also more faces that aren't as visible. So if we go into solid mode and then go into X-ray mode, we can look for what I call interior meshes. Interior meshes are meshes that the AI generated that are encased inside of another mesh. And so one example of those is right here. If we go into Alt-Z X-ray mode, we can see that there's a small mesh under here, and it's causing extra vertices, extra triangles that we don't need. So we're going to delete all of these because they're inside and we don't need them. And if you want to better access some of these parts, you could click on a panel and then just hit H for hide. And then you can go out of your X-ray mode. And then it's a lot easier to see them. So we can delete all of those and then hit Alt-H and go back and check our mesh and make sure we haven't deleted anything. And then we can also delete this floating object and just make sure you look at all sides of it, because sometimes objects can hide. So that reduced us by about 1,700 triangles, so not much. We still got a bit of work to do. One thing strategically you can do with now I'm going to want to use my modifiers to really get the number of faces down. And so what I like to do is, with all these broken apart into different objects, I like to click on one face, and then we're going to add a modifier. Now, it's without the use of scripts, it's going to get chaotic managing all these modifiers manually. The reason why we have to manage all these modifiers individually is because some areas we're going to want to draw away more faces than other areas. Especially if you're using this for virtual production and you have one area that's facing the camera and you want that to be relatively high poly, but on the other side you don't care about it, but you perhaps just need that mesh there to block light. So you want to manage these modifiers separately and then use scripts to apply or delete all them. And I'm going to give you those scripts. You can find them in my Patreon link. They're free. And yeah, we're going to get to work adding those modifiers. So I like to click on one common known spot of the mesh and then press Add Modifier and then search for my Decimate node, or Decimate modifier. You don't want to use the remesh node because it's going to result in you losing your texture, and you don't want that. So go for the Decimate node, and then I find the greatest modifier here is the planar Decimate. Collapse and unsubdivide kind of work. Unsubdivide probably works the least with these. And so planar gives you really smooth results and it's predictable. And so if you want to see how this modifier is affecting it, you can press Z and then go to wireframe. And then if you're in X-ray mode, hit Alt-Z. So what this does is it checks for the angle between two of these faces on an edge, and then it combines those triangles if it needs to. Now, one thing to note here is that faces is not triangles. I have 203 faces here and 203 triangles, and if I raise this to 5, I'll have 46 triangles but 2 faces. So just look at this triangle count and keep an eye on it. And then to apply this modifier to all objects in the scene that are in your current viewport, not in your out of your solo mode. Oh, I messed up. What you do is hit A for all, and then hit Control L, this time in object mode, and we're going to copy our modifier to all objects in our viewport that are selected. So once you do that, it really breaks things into individual parts and drastically reduces your triangle count. From there, you want to go along, and I would go back into material preview mode for this. In any areas of high importance, you're going to want to keep a little bit more mesh there. And then areas of very low importance, you're going to raise that angle limit a bit higher and get even less faces. Now what you want to watch for though is tearing along here because these objects are not connected. And so one way to do that is to get close to each other in the angle limit, not too far apart. And then just play this all delicately because you want to try to remove as many triangles as possible without damaging your front-facing meshes. So once you have all of your modifiers set in the way that you want, and you're paying attention to this triangle count here, go ahead and hit A for all, and then go into scripting. And here's where you're going to use one of these scripts that I gave, the apply all modifiers. And you do have a viewport here. it follows your selection, but the viewport is based on the last time you went in here. So almost every time you go in here, you're going to want to hit / twice. And this will take you to your current view. But what I like to see is just the modifier to my right. Because when I run this script with all of these objects selected, it's going to apply all of those modifiers individually. And this is different than if I were to select all of these objects and then right-click and hit join, because then it would join all the geometry back together and reduce it back to one modifier. So now I'm down to 24,000 triangles. And what I like to do now is go along parts that the camera will never see and just try to delete those faces completely. So those would be the back of this room. And you just want to remember that if you do this, then in Unreal Engine, from this view it will be fine, but from this side, light is able to shine through this. And so you're going to want to put a plane back here to block light. But you're still saving a massive amount of triangles. So go along here and delete these faces. And what you want to be careful of is just every couple, like that. Every couple blocks, check the front and make sure you're not deleting a front-facing face by accident. And if you do, just go back and don't do that. So I'm going to go along here and see what I can clean up. All right, got a couple of these faces deleted. When it came to fixing the holes in this triangle, it really presented a unique challenge. And so I'm going to show you how I did it, because I'm sure these holes appearing next to two planes that are close to each other, I'm sure that's going to happen again. So here was my fix. Going in here and trying to delete this as is was proving pretty useless. So what worked for me is going into number 3 mode, or just a flat 2D mode. And then I needed to select all of these objects that were associated with this geometry here. So to do that, I clicked the ones in the background and hit H for hide, and hid everything that could be hidden. And then on this table, I went into solid view and made sure I was in X-ray view. And then I'm going to want to hide that as well. Make sure I'm in X-ray view and in object mode, and then select all of these. Just drag my box along here and select all of these islands right here, and then bring that into solo mode by double tapping / and then joining all these objects. Now doing this was tricky because I couldn't join them right there, and if I hit A, yeah, I can't go into edit mode. I don't know what fixed this. I think I just went to material preview and hit A again. But that's usually because we have something other than geometry selected in our outliner. And I don't see anything. So now I have this separated, and I just need to find a way to separate all of these triangles and then break them apart in the center. And stretching this apart even and trying to break these up manually is pretty impossible, because if you hit Control R and try to subdivide through here, all you get is all these little points. So here's a trick that I developed. You can, in the troublesome parts, whatever your troublesome meshes are, in object mode, combine them all together with join. And then we're going to add one more object in here, and it's going to be a plane. And you see this line, we're going to drag that line and kind of make a saw blade to cut everything here in half. And then I'm going to hit S for scale just to make sure it extends everything. And then create a modifier that is a Boolean, and then the object of that Boolean is this plane. And what we're going to have to do now is, because this normal side is facing up and then this is down, it's deleting all of this. So we need to actually edit this mesh just by the plane. We need to edit by hitting tab and then just pressing Shift D and then escape and RX 180 so that it flips it around and there's now a normal facing the other way. Now we can tab out of this and we can see that our object is now just split down the center at one point. So we can apply this modifier and then delete this plane and then go into our number 3 mode, and now we can see that there is a line going through all these objects. And this might be easier for you if you can pull this all out, select it along here, and maybe even do this beforehand and press GZ to drag down. But I was wanting to do this with it in its original position to see if I can. So I know my line is there, and all I need to do, there we go. By getting really close, I can now select all of these faces, and I just want to make sure that I do the same over here. And then if I try to pull this apart right now, it's going to drag. But that's what you want to see, is straight lines. Because then you can press P and separate by selection. And then all of these units are now separate. So now with these as 2 separate objects, we can go in and modify these individually by going into our solo mode and then pressing tab and looking at it from our 3 mode, and then we see all these divots that we can select. I would go into vertices select mode and raise up, and we can even go a little bit further by grabbing a lot of these points and sort of fleshing them up. And so to do that, we hit SZ0, and then we can press GZ and bring this plane up. We didn't really get rid of any triangles. If anything, we added some, but it's still going to look a lot better, and we didn't add too many. So now let's go out of our solo mode and do the same thing to this bottom plane. Go into number 3, select all of these, and actually I'm going to lower this down by quite a bit. SZ0, and then bop this down. So now we have a cleaner table. We can hit Alt-H to unhide. What? Oh, I'm in edit mode. Object mode, tab, Alt-H. So removing this black couch actually proved about as difficult as removing the geometry inside here, simply because of the way that these islands break apart. So if I tried going in and deleting all of these objects, what I got was a really jagged edge along here that was impossible to work with. And if I use the sculpt tool but try to isolate some of these geometry, it would tug on the ones that I separated and then pull those away, and so that was happening along the window. And so the only solution that I found is to just leave this all one unit and then go to sculpt mode, and the tool that you'd want is elastic deform. And so for this case, I came here on the side, adjusted my radius and the strength, and then changed my fall off to be a constant. And then from here, this angle worked best. I just pushed my geometry underneath the couch, or wherever you need to push it underneath the world where it's going to be. Now, if you notice, it'll tug on this window a little bit. There's not really a lot I can do about that. Luckily, it's going to tug on the whole window evenly. But the only thing I can do about that is try to get further out from the window or lower my radius. But it doesn't make much of a difference. So I'm going to hide all this and then come forward and continue hiding. And I'm just left clicking and then dragging down. And then I'm going to want to undo a couple of those because I went a little too far. Now I want to come from the side and try to tuck this speaker into its own little slot. And if I could expose the couch, that would be even better. And then I get this warping along here, and a speaker face is flat. So I can flatten this by going into 7 mode and then selecting vertices out of X-ray mode. So I'm going to select this whole face here. Actually, I am going to want to be in X-ray mode so that I can grab overlapping vertices. And then press SY for scale Y and drag my cursor into 0. And you can see this from your 7 view too. And then you press GY and you pull this back a little bit. And then what happens is it gets this flatter edge on there. So look at this from the corner. It looks like we have some lumpiness here that I would kind of like to fix. Don't exactly know how. Let's just go to 7 and go into X-ray mode and select all of these corners and then look from our view. And maybe if we just SY and SZ to scale them, it will help. SY and then GY, and that'll kind of form that corner. Then SX, right around there. And then I don't really have an X mark yet, but I want to put these ones in with it. And that should have squared off our speaker by quite a bit. Maybe not perfect. Now that our couch is hidden beneath the couch that we wanted, we have to delete the vertices or the faces so that it doesn't take up extra room. But now that it's actually tucked out of the way, we can delete vertices without getting sharp edges. So we're going to go to 7 view again and go to tab and then just select as many of these faces as we can in one go. Well, we can do better than that. Without selecting the floor. It's okay if I get that under part there. And just hit bang. Delete. 2 more things for mesh cleanup that I want to do. The first is to go to this lump here and fix that. And that's going to be similar to the speaker facing. We do want to be in X-ray mode. And then go into 7 top mode. And I'm going to select all the affected vertices and then press SZ0. And then look at it from my 3 view and see if I have to lower these at all. So the way I devised to get rid of these holes is to use the sculpt tool again. And then I'm sure there's a better way to do this, honestly. But what I've been doing is grabbing elastic deform and setting the radius pretty small. And then setting the fall off to smooth. And then going along here and just dragging these close together. And you can increase the radius a bit to grab the geometry on the other side. So we're just going to keep pulling this together as smoothly as we can. I mean, there's going to be a little bit of warping because it's a hole. But what I do is once I get this close, try to stretch and smooth out my most tight point, which is down here. And then I'm going to go into X-ray mode and just go along here and select small increments and type S0 for scale 0. And all it's going to do is pinch all those vertices together in honestly not the best looking way. But if you've got to hide a hole or something and your topology makes no sense, this might be a way to do it. And so as I get towards this tighter hole here, I'm just going to take smaller increments until I can grab the last of it. And then when I'm done, exit out, see where I'm at. And the sculpting tools don't do very well here because these are two islands. But you can get away with a little bit of smoothing and sculpting. But ultimately, if you have a hole, I would just do a new prompt and try to not have that hole there. Now hopefully I can catch someone before they start going on their own on texturing and let you know that when you change the texture and you paint, this image here is going to have a star next to it. You have to hit save before you move on to your next texture. Otherwise you're going to lose all of your texture progress, and that's no fun. So let's get into painting this house a bit. There's a couple of touch-ups I want to make. First is this tree here that got imposed that's not there. And so for painting, what I like to do is go to texture paint. Well, not this tab. I like to just hit texture paint in here. And then I can keep my UV editing tab open and I can keep that as a color palette. So now I open my draw tool. And what I want to do is find where these faces are. So I'm going to hit edit mode again. And get out of X-ray mode and select one of these faces. It's going to lead me to here on the UV map. And so there's where I can pull my color sample from. So if I go back to texture paint and set my eyedropper tool for right here, then if I lower my radius a bit, I can remove this from the wall. And then to smooth in your paint marks, the smear tool and the soften tool will be your friends. I personally like the smear tool. I think it's a little bit more effective. And it kind of changes everything back to the dreamy quality of most AI stuff anyway. And then one thing I'm going to want to do here for this lack of shading that's here now is if you can't make a line, go to stroke and line. And then I'm going to lower my radius to about there. And then actually I'm going to need the draw tool, but yay, radius is still the same. And then sample this color, which is the shading. You can see that it looks like it's still there, but it's a bit off the texture. So then stroke, I need to go to line. And you just click and drag and it draws a line where you're going to draw that texture. So you can draw your shading back in, your baked lighting. And that corner's done. Next corner is underneath where that chair was. And so for this, I'm going to use the clone tool. And I'm going to hold shift and then tap a spot to set my 3D cursor. And this is a lot like the clone tool in like GIMP or Photoshop. So I'm probably going to choose something out here. And then up my radius and just smoothly start painting it. And I can't go that far because the table texture is there. So I might have to set this a little bit back here. And that's what it looks like. And then I can give that a smear to kind of blend it in. I want a softer strength though. And then I want to set my stroke back to space. And then I can tab out. Look at my object, see if there's anything else I need to paint. I kind of do want to get the speaker and get the light off of it, the light reflection. Guess I could leave just a sliver of that baked lighting. Kind of makes it look realistic. And then that is about it for texture painting. I can't think of anything else. I kind of want to touch this up, the coffee table. There we are. So now that my painting is done, I'm going to go to Image. So one thing to look out for is just because you have a corresponding texture up here that also works as the color palette or your paint palette, doesn't mean it's the image you're on. So you want to find the actual image you're on and make sure you save before you leave. And so because I've brought in this model a couple times, it's getting confusing. So if I click on this face here and go to materials, I can see that we're on material 13, but more important, if I go down to base color and expand this, I can see we're on image number 5. So on this side, if I select my image number 5, that's where I can see my painted texture, where we can see there's no tree here anymore. And then I'm going to want to go to Image and then Save. And now that packs that texture, and I can exit out. And then I'm going to, before I leave this, I'm going to want to make sure all my geometry is merged into one object, which it is. So I can call this one complete and do a periodic save, and then let's continue working through our organic shapes. I'm going to move on to this pigeon mochi. And so there's a couple tricks. I've done this one a couple times, and it presents a challenge that the Shiba Inu kind of hit a little bit. So we're going to do the same process. Tab, select a face, separate by loose parts. I'm going to click his left eye after pressing tab. Add my decimate, planar, step it to 10 degrees, reselect, A for all, Control L, copy modifiers, and then tune accordingly. And so here's what you'll notice. I'm going to leave these front. I want his beak components to be 5. Yeah, let's make this. These are still 10. So I have 5 on the beak. The rest is 10. And then on the back here, I'm going to go, maybe 15 is too much. All right. The other thing with this pigeon is we have to clear what's on the inside of him. So since we're separated, let's hide. And then once we get into here, we can delete. Let's do this faster. Seems like it with these inside parts, it's faster to hide the outside. And then kind of select all like this. So there's just usually so many parts. Okay, and then Alt-H to unhide. So here presents one of our problems where, I guess one of those parts I needed. I'm going to select everything on bottom and hide that. And then select everything on top, hide, everything from the back, hide, everything in the front, hide. Now I can hopefully delete some of this. And then Alt-H to unhide. There we go. I still am missing that part. That I need to keep. All right, there we go. So what I'm going to want to do with this texture here when I go to UV editing, let's select my correct object. Oh no, they're all separate. Okay, I just have my pigeon selected. And then let's change my texture. I am on it's not image 7. Yeah, that's the house. I'm on material 11. There we go, image 11. So what we want to do is save this texture and then sort of round all these colors together. And I'm going to show you how to do that. Go to Image, Save As, and we're going to save this as Pigeon Texture. And I'm going to save this in my Downloads folder so I can find it. And then what we're going to do is go to GIMP. And this is a tool that I like to use to compress all of these colors into some common colors that we can use. All right, so here's our texture after we've opened it in GIMP. So what we're going to do is make a palette for all of this and then compress all of these colors to that palette. Your palettes tab is, if you go to the right and look at this little tiny itty bitty button that if your monitor margins are set wrong you won't even see, and press add tab and go down to palettes. Wherever it is. Here. So you can see my last palette. We're going to right click and make a new palette. I'm going to call this Pigeon Tutorial. And then this little button here called New Layer, we're going to click this and then double click our new color. And we're going to add all of these colors. What you want to do is for each one, like gray, you want to try to get in between the two colors so it catches the dark gray and the light gray. So I'm going to set it right there for the gray. Capture a color for this blue wing. New. Capture a color for the gold beak and the feet. Capture the black of his eyes, because I'm going to need that. And then capture the white of his eyes. And that's probably going to be close to just white. So using this palette of 5 colors, we're going to go to Layer, or Image, and then Mode, and then Indexed. And under Use Custom Palette, we're going to go up and find our custom one. And once we are done, we can take that texture and just overwrite the pigeon texture that we've saved. If you want to get it again, you can, or save it as something else, but I'm just going to overwrite. And then come into here, and under base color, make sure you're on the right material. We're going to open a new image, and it's going to be this. And what that's done is basically taken all of the lighting out of our pigeon. Unfortunately, we still have these marks. The marks are caused by the shading, actually. So to help with that, we can hit A for all, right click, and hit Shade Smooth. And now we get a little bit better shading between those units. And so to do texture paint on this, we need to regroup them. But before we regroup it, I want to make sure that our polygons are set properly and that we run our scripts. So let's go back to scripting. And I wish there was a way to just select all of one topic that we're working on, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So we're just going to have to I would keep this geometry kind of separate. Don't too tightly pack your scene, and then you won't have to keep deselecting things. So we're going to run our script. All modifiers have been applied. Go back to modeling. A for all. Or let's go to object mode. And then if you don't have them all selected, A for all, right click and join. And now you have your object. Again, the geometry, it's not going to be really good. And actually shading smooth tends to, if you have high geometry, shade smooth works very well. If you have low levels of geometry, it doesn't work too well. So you can decide between shading smooth and shading flat. Let me clean up this texture real quick and finish up this model, and then we will move on from our pigeon. So I like to go to texture paint, and then I go to UV editing, and again use this as my color palette. So I'm going to go to texture draw and sample my gray color and then paint that in. I'm going to turn my strength up, zoom out a bit, and then stroke is space. And then for this one, I'm going to want to set my fall off to constant so that I can get in close on these edges here. All right, and there we go. That's my process for cleaning up the pigeon. Don't forget to save your project periodically, and then we can move on to some of these other objects. By the way, our savings for that object, we started at 49,000 triangles. We are now at 11,000 triangles. So pretty decent savings on that one. I'm going to save my texture here by clicking on image and then save. And I have to do this before I move on to the next texture, or else I'll lose my progress. I don't think we should do the same texture compression that we did to the pigeon on this cat, especially because of all the baked lighting that's involved here, or simulated baked lighting. What I do think needs to happen, though, is this cat needs to be lightened up on the other side, because all of these shades are very blue, and we need to brighten that up. And so I think I'm going to do that manually by going to Texture Paint. But first we need to select all of our objects and rejoin them. Now I can go to Texture Paint and start painting some of this in. So let's see if this has results. I'm not entirely sure. I'm kind of just problem solving as I go here. That was too much. There we go. I'm going to want to change my fall off, that's for sure. Let's try smooth shading on this one. There, that helped us see our paint a bit better. I'm gonna undo those paint marks because they're so extreme with that fall off. Back to shade smooth, but then let's go to texture paint. Have my custom fall off, and let's try this again. There we go, that's better. So it's almost like I'm a light. And I need a big radius for that. We're gonna have to draw in some whiskers to this cat, I just realized. Because we're kinda... I think the cat needs dark whiskers. Yeah, let's brighten up under here. This is a little unrealistic. Maybe a little bit of shading. Wow, those are dark. Really trying to make it not look like this cat got decorated with a paint gun, but it's sort of looking like that. So let's try this smear tool. Try smearing some of this around. And my computer is running slow right now, by the way, in doing this. That's an area that could use some light. There. And then we got to draw in some whiskers for this cat and maybe clean up his face a little bit. So to do that, we're going to need to open our color palette. So we are on material 10. So let's go to image 10, and there we are. So let's select our nose color. We do have a fall off. Let's lower our radius and lower our strength. This is not, it looks like lipstick. Let's get some shading in then. So first, wherever that is, I need dark pink. No, that's not it either. I need this triangle. There we go. I could probably just drop a cat mouth over here, but it's not going to blend very well. But what I need is this color. I should probably be looking at a cat mouth for reference. That looks awful. I'm sorry, cat. I'm sorry. I'm not good at this. Oh, this is getting worse by the second. What if we smear it? There. It's closer than it was. What does a cat mouth look like? Let's figure this out. I mean, I guess I wasn't too far off. I'm gonna leave it. It just looks like the cat's wearing lipstick. I'm gonna call this one done. We went from 50,000 triangles to 17,000 triangles. I'm going to save the texture on my cat again by hitting image and then save. Let's see what this Gator brings. We're sitting at 50,000 triangles for this one as well. And let's see what we can do. Start, of course, by pressing P, separating by loose parts. That's interesting. Okay, I was just editing that one piece. And it looks like we should probably touch up some of the lighting right here and just make that greener. I don't think we should do the textures too much, but I am gonna, the texture compression, I don't think that's needed here, but I do want to clean up his teeth a bit. So let's start by checking for interior meshes. Doesn't look like there are any, so that's good. Okay. Next step is to create a modifier. So left eye. Decimate, planar. This one's probably going to need 5 degrees all across the board. Down to 29,000. Let's see if we can get lower. Probably similar to cat, actually. That's within good. Can we get even lower? I think we can. Yeah, we could get pretty low triangles with this one. So we're now at 14,000 triangles. If there's anywhere I should bring that up. Oh, it's pretty okay actually. Maybe right here. Yeah, around those cheeks a little bit, around these cheeks. And eyes don't really need it. So let's go ahead and apply these. And then back to UV editing. And we're set. This one wasn't too big of a challenge. All these parts kind of wrap around, so there wasn't really much we can do for the bottom of this mesh. But let's fix some of this shading and then move on. So our material is 0. Wow, it is image 0. Okay, and I'm gonna go to texture paint. And then what I want to do is just underneath here, make that green again. So where is that? Right here. And there must be that. So I'm going to take from here and then just increase my radius and start applying it down here. For some reason, I can't seem to get to this mesh. And I don't know why that is. It's right here. There it is. Are these all separate objects? Oh, I forgot to join all these objects together. Wait, I thought I did, actually. Must have missed this one. Somehow. That's actually a decent method. All I'm doing is smearing right now. It's working beautifully. Until I zoom out. Let's try soften. Yeah, that's a little better. All right, let's define these teeth a little bit more. Actually, I mean that's all right for what it is. I think one thing I do want to do though is on this belly here. I kind of want to fill this in just a little bit. There we go. Then soften this. Or let's smear some into that. There we go. All right, there's another object cleaned up. And so this one was pretty easy to work with. It was a little unique because of all the different lighting that's hitting him. And so like this side actually should be lightened up just a bit. Kind of like that. Just spot in some green. Clearly too much there, but anyway, that's it for our Gator bodyguard. I came up with a slightly different method of doing the desk after recording this, so I decided to do this one separately. Basically, because there's so many flat meshes on here, we can replace a lot of these with flat planes. But that's not going to work if we do our traditional method, because if we separate these by loose parts, you'll see that a majority of them share a corner. You know, we can pick out these ones, but that's not a lot of savings. And once we reduce the meshes, what I learned is that there is a lot of tearing. And so for this top, there's so many triangles up here, and only a couple of them don't share an edge. So what we're going to do is just bring in a plane, make sure we're in object mode for now, not in edit mode, and we're going to match it up to one of these planes. So I'm just going to pick one, scale it down, hit RY90 and then RZ90 to rotate it in place, and then GY, bring it so it just pops through, and then SZ, GZ to bring it in place, a little more scaling on Z, and then scale with S for on the X axis. This is X, right? Yes. And then pop it in place. You can hit 1 and then click on this ball here to flip it around, or depending on what project you're working on, but that option's there. And when you're in this mode, you can move it around freely without, it's already bound to the X and Y axis. It won't move depth-wise. So let's pop it there, and then we're going to hide this. And we're going to go to UV editing so we can have this image up. And you do want to be in material preview mode again. One thing you want to do is make sure that, I'm going to unhide here, that this plane shares this material. And so you're going to need to find this material 0. And then I would also note what image it's using so you can bring that up in the UV editor. What we need to do prior to deleting this is see where the texture comes from. Now you can see this is kind of cloudy. That's all going to go away. We're just going to hit edit, go into edit mode, and then hit A for all. And we can see that there's a sizable chunk right here, where if we put the new plane right there in its entirety, it'll match the color perfectly and we won't have to do any color matching. So let's focus in on that spot. and then I'm going to hit 1 and reverse it, and then hit A for all. Well, I want to rejoin these because I don't want them all separate. So I'm going to hit Tab for edit with them all together, and just select a square here. Select these all. That's interesting. Why did it do that? Oh, because I'm selecting vertex select. So go to face select and then try that again. There we go. I don't want it to take out these 3, but the rest of it's perfect. So let's just hit delete, and then make sure you're only deleting the faces, otherwise it'll get really big. There's a lot of interior meshes in here, but I'll take care of that in a second. I'm sure it started around 50,000 triangles. So now we hit Tab to go in object mode, and then Alt H to go into to unhide our plane. We're going to add this to our material, and then we're going to hit Tab for edit and make sure you have your face selected, and then in UV editing mode we're going to size that down and then drag it in the UV space where the old side of the desk was, because it's going to share similar lighting, color, and everything. And you can rotate it if you want to make it take up as much space as you can. And then tab out of that, and once you remove the lines of your previewer, you might realize that you can barely tell the difference. So let's hide that, and I'm going to take this opportunity to delete my interior meshes, and then I'm going to repeat this process for all these sides, and let's see just how low we can get this down to. I'm thinking we're only going to need the corners of stuff. So let's get to work and see where this goes. Hide these, and now I can see through my object and delete all of these meshes. I was surprised that I'm not selecting these, but then I remembered it's probably not because I'm in face select mode. Whereas if I was in vertices select mode, it probably would have selected those corners there. But because of this, I can't delete edges, so I have to go back into vertex select mode and delete these. Okay, tab and Alt H for unhide, and then I'm going to repeat this with as many textures as I can, or as many faces as I can. Oh, by the way, if you add a plane while you're in edit mode, you can, in fact, it'll automatically bind the material of the desk to the material of whatever you're working on. So that's a plus. The hard part with doing this is that once you deselect it, it's part of this mesh, so it makes it harder to select. So here I have one triangle too many that I removed. So just to fix this, I'm just going to make a new triangle by selecting these two edges and hitting F for fill. And then Alt H to unhide. And here we go. The other thing I should do is go along the top of this table here. And I can include my new squares or my new planes point here. But go to all of these triangles. Let's have X-ray mode enabled. All of these vertices hit SZ0. Actually, let's do SZ.001 so that they get very close, but we don't have objects occupying the same space and flickering, kind of like they are here. A little bit on the edges there. But that's fine. If you want better detail, do a little bit less scaling there. I'm going to keep plugging and see where we go. And then if you need, you can move around this single corner here to cover what you need. And then with this one, we definitely want to level all of these together. Our triangle count is 22,000, which is pretty good. Let's see how far this can go. All right, then let's go for a little bit of texture painting. Some of these textures don't really make sense too much. So texture paint. And then I'm going to want to select these colors, this face color here. And I'm just going to put my own twist on this face here. So let's just paint over everything. Smear it around. And then what I like to use is, can I paint these corners up? Maybe not. What I like to use is this line tool, so stroke. Go to, well actually I like the curve for this one. This one's interesting. So let's go to our number 1 view, so we're facing front at it. And we're going to draw a curve, but it's with 2 lines. So hold Control and then right click to add your points. And you want to follow the guidelines in the back, but you want to just make a line. And then your brush is going to be texture draw. I think we need to redraw our line now. Our radius is going to be very low, and our color that we're going to call is going to be somewhere around up here. I want this shadow. That looks like it's up here. So stroke, line. Looks like I did that with the smear tool. Oh, stroke is curve. Control, right click, right click. And then this is to make the lines in our drawers. So I'm going to hold control and then right click. And it looks like we need to change our texture up a bit, or our paint color. And then also lower our radius down a little bit more. Okay, that's good. I'm going to want to lower the strength too. There we go. So let's give 3 drawers. And then here's what I'm going to do up here. Use the curve tool again. I don't know how to reset this. Probably just, oh, hit delete. Okay. So that's how you make a line with the curve. And then to actually make our curve, we're going to hold control and then right click and drag out. So for our first point, we actually don't want to drag out. For our second point, we're going to drag out. And then our third point is going to be up here. And then maybe we can there we go. I was trying to get it to look like a handle. And then this stays in our viewfinder, so we could just move this around and say I'm going to drop a handle. And this is going to be, I don't know, a custom texture created by us. So I'm going to drop a handle. Let's zoom out just a bit, make those handles bigger. Drop a handle here. Let's make that wider. Increase the strength and make it darker. Okay, maybe not that big. Or that big. There we go. And so you can make this look, you know, probably better than I'm making it. But kind of just going for representation here. Assuming my handles are actually straight with each other. Okay, there we go. So let's move on to a different mesh now. I want to do this Shiba Inu puppy because it's a really great example of how this method can be done quickly and save a ton. So let's go to object mode, hit /, and hit tab, and we are at 49,000 triangles. Let's see how quickly we can reduce this down, because I've done this one before and it works pretty fast. Select a polygon, hit Control L. Well, actually we don't need to do that. We can just select a polygon and hit P, separate by loose parts. And then, just like the last one, I'm going to select a point, let's say dog's forehead, and then apply my modifier. Decimate, planar. I figure everything I can do to the face without it looking bad, I can do to the rest of the body. So let's go for 25 degrees. I still don't really see much of a difference. But I've decreased my face count from 672 to 12. And I've gone from 672 triangles to 153 triangles. So let's apply this to everything. You know what? We have a bit of tearing there. Let's go with it anyway because I want to show you guys a little trick. So let's hit A and then Control L and copy modifiers. And now we are at 12,000 polygons. Tab out. There's some tearing going on. So let's reduce this by a bit. Let's go to 18 degrees and see what that brings. 18 degrees is 16,000 triangles and still looks reasonable. So I'd say we can go ahead and go with that. Now on these face ones here, it's a low number, but what you can do is where it matters here, like the paw, increase this count. So do this as needed, and then you can go back to scripting and run that same script. So just make sure that it keeps going to this window here. Okay, so the trick here is if you're in this scripting window and you want to isolate this, I had to drag over it and then double click with shift held here. And then isolate that. Run your script. And if I recall, this one took a while. Yeah, it's still thinking. Looks like there might be a progress bar on the window. No. So it's done. Now we can go back to modeling. And we see our model. So then we're going to hit A. Do a spot check, make sure there's no modifiers in here, and then hit A, right click, join, and then / back out, and we're done. So we've taken, on that case, 50,000 triangles to 15,000 triangles, which is a pretty significant gain.